Welcome to our channel. In this video, we share content for historical and educational purposes, presented in a way that draws you in and encourages you to see the past from a fresh perspective. Stay with us, surprising facts and exciting discoveries await. During World War II, Allied forces often struggled with the rapid-fire capability of certain German machine guns, while German forces were equally concerned about the strength and effectiveness of the American M2 Browning and its .50 BMG cartridge. These weapons gained dramatic nicknames over the years due to their power, but the real story behind them is more complex than those descriptions suggest. To understand how the M2 came to be, we have to look back to World War I. Military leaders quickly realized how essential machine guns were on the battlefield. At that time, however, most of them used the same ammunition as standard infantry rifles. As new military technology appeared, such as early armored aircraft and tanks, it became clear that a more capable defensive tool was needed. General John Pershing recognized this shift and called for a new machine gun powerful enough to counter these emerging threats more effectively than the existing .30 caliber models. That challenge was given to John Browning, one of America's most well-known firearm designers. He received the task of creating a machine gun capable of firing a half-inch round at a velocity exceeding 2,700 feet per second, a significant increase compared to the ammunition used at the time. John Browning, one of America's most influential firearm designers, was tasked with creating a machine gun capable of firing a half-inch round at more than 2,700 feet per second, far beyond the performance of his previous designs. To meet this challenge, he took his dependable M1917.30 caliber water-cooled machine gun and expanded its overall design to handle a larger and more powerful cartridge. The new cartridge itself was essentially an enlarged version of the .30-06 round, redesigned to be rimless for smoother operation. It also drew some inspiration from early international ammunition captured during World War I. This eventually became the .50 BMG, also known as the 12.7 by 99 mm cartridge, which would grow into one of the most widely used large-caliber rounds in military history. After multiple adjustments, the first prototype machine gun was completed and entered production as the M1921, a water-cooled heavy machine gun intended primarily for anti-aircraft roles. Early testing explored where else it could be used, but the results were mixed. For ground troops, the system was simply too heavy to manage effectively. The water-cooled version weighed around 120 pounds, while the air-cooled variant weighed about 84 pounds, with an additional 44 pounds for the tripod. Even without ammunition, the complete setup could reach 130 to 170 pounds, and the recoil made accurate use challenging. Aircraft of the era were also too small to carry it efficiently, and early vehicle turrets struggled with its left-side-only ammunition feed. As a result, its most practical use at the time remained coastal and stationary anti-aircraft defense. Although John Browning passed away in 1926, development carried on. Engineers refined the system, improved internal components, and introduced a way to switch between left and right side feeding simply by adjusting the top cover. They also created a universal receiver that could support either a water-cooled barrel or an air-cooled version, making the design far more adaptable for future needs. The M2's development continued with options for either a heavy air-cooled barrel or a lighter version designed specifically for aircraft. With these improvements, the design finally began to show true potential. After additional refinements, it received the official designation M2 Browning machine gun. Around this time, several other countries were shifting toward larger 20 mm and even 30 mm cannons, but U.S. designers believed the .50 caliber round's high velocity, reliability, and flexibility still made it a practical and effective choice. Because of that, production continued, and its real capabilities would soon become clear as a new global conflict began. During World War II, the M2 quickly earned a strong reputation and became known simply as the .50 among service members. It also picked up the nickname Ma Deuce, a playful combination of the words mother and deuce, referring to its M2 model name. By the time the war escalated, the United States already had M2s deployed in a wide variety of roles. Mounted on aircraft, placed on naval ships, installed on vehicles, used in anti-aircraft positions, and set on tripods for ground operations. Its versatility made it useful in many situations where dependable defensive capability was needed. One of its largest early uses was on aircraft. The aviation versions used lighter barrels and operated at higher firing rates, sometimes reaching around 1,200 rounds per minute. This increased rate was necessary because aircraft had only brief moments to engage their targets before passing by. In some setups, the numbers became truly impressive. For example, the well-known B-17 Flying Fortress bomber relied heavily on M2 machine guns for protection during long missions. In later variants, such as the B-17G, the aircraft could carry up to 13 M2s arranged in paired mounts across several defensive positions. The P-47 fighter bomber also used multiple M2s to give pilots consistent and reliable firepower during missions. The P-47 Thunderbolt carried 8 M2 machine guns, 4 in each wing, while the Douglas A-26 Invader pushed this concept even further, with some configurations featuring up to 18 M2s placed across the airframe. This included 8 in the nose, 4 in each wing, and 2 in a powered turret. Early in the war, the M2 quickly demonstrated clear advantages over lighter .30 caliber weapons. It offered a strong combination of consistent firing speed and individual round performance, giving aircraft crews a dependable way to defend themselves and engage enemy targets. When used in groups, as seen on many American aircraft, the combined effect created a highly effective defensive system. U.S. aircraft frequently used the M2 to disable vehicles, equipment, and other battlefield assets from the air. Its performance was especially useful against targets with limited protection on their upper surfaces. Because of its reliability, the heavier barrel version soon became standard equipment on many tanks, vehicles, and support platforms. By 1945, millions of M2s had been produced, making it one of the most widely manufactured machine guns in history. Its presence across the battlefield was well known, and this widespread availability made low-altitude air attacks more challenging for opposing aircraft. On armored vehicles, the M2 was often mounted toward the rear of a tank's turret and operated by a crew member positioned behind it. This setup allowed the weapon to be elevated for higher-angle defense, particularly useful against fast-moving aircraft. Although the operator was positioned outside the interior of the vehicle, this arrangement provided crews with an important additional layer of protection during aerial threats. Before getting into how it was used in the field, here's a simple explanation of how the M2's barrel moves during operation. The M2 uses a short recoil system, meaning the barrel and bolt begin locked together and move backward briefly after each shot. This keeps the cartridge properly supported while internal pressure stabilizes. After moving back a short distance, around 10 millimeters, the barrel stops and the bolt continues rearward on its own, removing the empty case. The recoil spring then pushes the bolt forward again, loading the next round from the belt and continuing the cycle for as long as the trigger is held. This design allows the system to operate smoothly and consistently. Now, regarding how German forces viewed the M2, they had several concerns, largely because of how widely the United States used it. American units often prioritized strong, sustained defensive capability, and the M2 became a key part of that approach. U.S. forces also had consistent access to supplies, which meant they could support their equipment without the shortages other armies sometimes faced before long. Nearly every vehicle or aircraft on the American side carried at least one of these heavy machine guns. Compared to smaller caliber weapons, the .50 caliber round offered significantly more range and impact, and this difference was especially noticeable when compared with standard infantry ammunition of the era. Because of this, cover that might have been effective against lighter rounds, such as brick walls or sandbag structures, offered far less protection against the M2. Even if a barrier held initially, continued fire could gradually break through, making it difficult for opposing forces to rely on typical defensive positions. This combination of reliability, availability, and performance is what made the M2 one of the most respected and challenging weapons for opposing forces to face, shaping how it was perceived throughout the conflict. When discussing how different vehicles were affected by .50 caliber fire, it's important to stay within safe and factual limits. Heavily armored tanks such as the German Panzer series were generally resistant to most small arms fire, but certain components, like external equipment, tracks, or viewing optics, could still be damaged under the right conditions. Lighter vehicles and lightly armored tanks used in the Pacific Theater were more vulnerable, and crews sometimes encountered situations where these vehicles could be disabled through concentrated fire from multiple sources. During the war, some fast-moving charges and sudden advances by opposing units caught American forces by surprise, leading U.S. crews to respond with all available defensive tools, including the M2. These events were chaotic and challenging for everyone involved, and historians continue to study them today. There is also a long-standing misconception about the .50 caliber being restricted under the Geneva Conventions due to its power. This claim is not accurate. The treaty does not ban the .50 caliber round. However, its large size and high energy made it significantly more powerful than typical infantry ammunition of the time, which led to many stories, exaggerations, and misunderstandings about its real-world effects. Because of its strength, even indirect contact with structures or equipment could cause substantial damage, and opposing soldiers were well aware of the M2's capabilities. This awareness influenced tactics on both sides. German forces, for instance, adjusted their approach by using snipers, armored vehicles, or indirect fire, such as mortars and artillery, to neutralize American defensive positions instead of engaging them directly. It's also important to note that Germany did not field a heavy machine gun comparable in size or performance to the American M2. Their primary weapons, including the MG-34 and MG-42, were highly effective and had impressive firing speeds, especially when mounted on stabilized tripods for long-range use. However, the 8mm Mauser cartridge they relied on did not match the energy or specialized role of the .50 caliber round, which helped explain why the M2 had such a distinct role on the battlefield. The closest German equivalent to the M2 was a 13mm heavy machine gun which was used mainly on fighter aircraft. There were plans to mount captured M2s on U-boats for defensive use while surfacing, and Germany even produced compatible ammunition for this idea, showing that they recognized the M2's effectiveness, though these adaptations were rarely employed. Before discussing some of the more unusual adaptations of the M2, it's helpful to look at the different types of ammunition it could use. The standard round was the full metal jacket ball type, which was reliable and suitable for general use. Beyond that, several specialized variations were created to match different mission requirements. There were multiple types of armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate reinforced materials. Incendiary rounds were made to ignite flammable surfaces, a feature particularly relevant in aerial combat, where fuel leaks could become a hazard. There were also hybrid rounds that combined both functions, armor-piercing and incendiary, providing versatility for crews who needed to address a wide range of situations. Another variation, the armor-piercing incendiary tracer, added a visible tracer element, which helped operators see the path of each round. This was especially useful for adjusting aim at long distances or when engaging fast-moving aircraft. Because .50 BMG rounds remained effective at extended ranges, often beyond 2 kilometers, belts were typically loaded with a balanced mix of ammunition types. A common pattern included a tracer round every 5th shot for general ground use. Aircraft loadouts varied depending on the mission, often blending armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer rounds to support both aerial engagements and ground support roles. After World War II, additional specialized ammunition types were developed, including multi-purpose rounds intended to provide flexibility across different operational needs. These advancements continued the .50 caliber's long history of adaptation and refinement in various military settings. Some post-World War II ammunition designs combined multiple functions into a single .50 BMG cartridge. One example included a dense core for improved penetration, paired with specialized materials that increased its effectiveness against certain types of equipment. This gave it performance similar to a small cannon round, but within a .50 caliber format. Another development was the SLAP round, short for Saboted Light Armor Penetrator. Similar in concept to the saboted rounds used by tanks, it used a lightweight outer casing and a very dense internal penetrator, often made of tungsten. This allowed it to travel at higher speeds and perform well against lightly protected vehicles or equipment. These rounds were typically reserved for precision-focused platforms rather than fully automatic fire due to their cost and specialized purpose. The 50 BMG cartridge impressed military planners to the point that they eventually designed long-range rifles around it. One historical example came from the Vietnam War era, when a U.S. marksman experimented with adding a scope to an M2 machine gun to engage faraway targets with single, carefully controlled shots, something smaller caliber rifles struggled with at extreme distances. This experimentation helped inspire the later development of purpose-built .50 caliber precision rifles, such as the M82 Barrett, which became well known for its ability to engage equipment and other long-range objectives reliably. No discussion of the .50 caliber would be complete without mentioning the quad .50 system. When a single heavy machine gun wasn't sufficient for certain defensive roles, engineers created a platform that mounted 4 M2s together. This setup was used primarily for anti-aircraft defense and for protecting large areas where a strong, concentrated defensive capability was needed. The M45 Maxim quad mount, often known simply as the quad .50, was originally developed as a mobile air defense system to counter low-flying aircraft. The .50 BMG was effective, but aircraft moved quickly, and early single-gun mounts didn't provide enough coverage. The solution was to mount 4 M2 machine guns together, creating a system capable of firing roughly 40 rounds per second. Germany fielded a similar concept with its quad 20mm anti-aircraft cannons, which were powerful but much heavier and designed specifically for stationary anti-aircraft roles. The quad .50, in contrast, was lighter, more versatile, and easier to position where needed. Its electrically powered turret allowed fast rotation and elevation, up to 90 degrees, so operators could quickly bring fast-moving aircraft into view. The mount could be placed directly on the ground or attached to vehicles, and as the war progressed and Allied air control increased, units began using the quad .50 for ground support as well. The combined fire from 4.50 caliber guns provided strong defensive capability, especially when protecting advancing infantry or securing key positions. The quad .50 continued to serve well after World War II, appearing in both the Korean War and the Vietnam War. In some cases, it was mounted on trucks to safeguard convoys from sudden attacks, helping crews respond rapidly to threats from multiple directions. For the 50 caliber gunners of the Second World War, the M2 provided significant defensive strength. At the same time, operating such a recognizable and capable system meant that opponents often focused attention on these positions, since the weapon's distinctive sound and effectiveness made it an important target in many engagements. For many years, .50 caliber gunners on vehicles and tanks had very limited protection from incoming small arms fire, and early designs did not include shields. Protective mounts became standard much later, particularly during the Vietnam War. Even in more recent conflicts, vehicles such as Humvees did not receive proper shielding until armed forces identified the need for better protection in challenging environments like urban areas. This led to the development of improved turret systems and eventually remote weapon stations such as CROWS. These systems allow the operator to remain safely inside the vehicle while controlling the weapon through a joystick and camera interface. Modern versions include helpful technology such as laser rangefinders, night vision equipment, and thermal imaging. Remote stations are also compatible with a variety of weapons, including other machine guns and certain automatic launchers, offering crews much more flexibility and safety. What's truly remarkable about the M2 Browning is how far it has come. A weapon that once appeared unlikely to succeed has evolved into a platform still widely used today. More than a century after its introduction, only small updates have been needed over time. The most noticeable upgrade has been the M2A1 configuration, which features a quicker barrel change system, an improved flash suppressor, and a manual safety. Despite these refinements, the core design remains largely unchanged. Just as the MG42 has survived through modernized versions, the M2 Browning has an even longer history, originating around World War I, and continues to be a reliable and relevant system today. With its proven design and adaptable caliber, it shows no signs of being phased out anytime soon.